YouTube, you already know what time it is. We have to do our CDL pick'ems for the second week of the Major 3 qualifiers. And if I get a flawless week, I gotta hit 50,000 subs by the end of this month. First match of the weekend is going to be Boston Breach versus the London Royal Ravens. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm just not confident in London's game at all. I know Boston also lost their series in the first week of the qualifiers, but I just think that they are a way more consistent team, and they're a team that has a much higher floor. London barely beat a not so good Paris Legion team, and Boston, they lost a relatively close series to NYSL, but I have to go with Boston just because I think that they do have that higher floor that I'm talking about, where I don't know, I have more trust and more faith in them, and I know kind of what they're going to do compared to this London team. Like, this London team could come out and they could 3-0 Boston in 15 minutes, or they could get 3-0'd. Toronto Ultra versus the Minnesota Rocker. Now, Minnesota went 2-0 last week. I know I had them in the D tier, but they looked great because not only did they go 2-0, they won both series 3-0, 3-0. And those wins not only were dominant, they were against solid teams. LAG and LAT. They beat both Los Angeles teams. But here's kind of my thought process on how this series is going to go. So I'm assuming Toronto is going to veto Minnesota's only good hardpoint map, which is going to be Gavutu. Now, Minnesota has yet to ban or veto, I should say, a Berlin hardpoint, and they've picked it 7 times. They've picked it the most out of any hardpoint map that they could, which once again doesn't make any sense to me. And Toronto's 6-5 in Berlin. So Minnesota, I'm assuming, is going to veto Berlin this time. They should. If they don't, that's really where I favor Toronto. If they do, then that means we're going to have a Tuscan and a Bocage hardpoint. So it favors Toronto in that matchup. So going back to the pickups, I have Toronto Ultra winning this series. I'm going to say it does go to that game 5. But then Toronto Ultra clutch up. And for the LAG Florida series, Big P is back, guys. If you didn't see, LAG announced that Gunless is back. He's healthy. He's rested from surgery. He is in the starting lineup for Spart. Now, this is going to be a very interesting series. I think this is one that LAG needs to win. They got to start back again on the right foot with Gunless. So I think they're going to come out guns blazing. They're a solid team. I think they are a better team than the Florida Mutineers. So I have this series in favor of LAG. Moving on to day 2, guys, we have NYSL versus Paris Legion. Look, man, NYSL is going to win this series. They look great in hard points. I know they lost to Atlanta FaZe, but I'm just confident that this team is in a good spot right now. And more importantly, they seem hungry. You know, they won the Pro-Am, but it doesn't matter because they didn't get any pro points. They're still down bad when it comes to the CDL standings, and they need these wins because they need to claw their way out of the hole so they can qualify to even attend COD Champs. Next, we have Seattle Surge versus LAT. This is going to be another series where I kind of break down the vetoes and how I think it's going to go. So if you scroll over, well, not scroll over because I'm doing the scrolling, but if you look at LAT stats so far this year, Bocage is their auto veto. They've vetoed it 12 times. They've only picked it once. And it looks like all the other maps besides Gavutu, where they've never vetoed it, it kind of depends matchup, you know, to matchup. And then on the side of Seattle Surge, I don't know why the layout is different, but they are a Gavutu and Berlin hating ass team. They don't like to play either of those 2 maps. They rarely ever pick Berlin. They picked Gavutu a couple times, but it's also their most vetoed. They love Tuscan. They pick it every single time. They've not vetoed it once in the league so far, and it's their best hardpoint because they are currently 18-25 this year in hardpoint overall, but they're 8-8 in Tuscan, 0-6. Okay, on the flip side, they're 0-6 on Gavutu. So I'm assuming they're going to veto Gavutu in this series because when you look at LAT, well, they're 32-16 overall, 10-4 on Gavutu, 11-4 on Tuscan, 4-4 on Bocage, even though they don't really play it, and 7-4 on Berlin. So GVU2 should be gone in this series. And I would assume that even though Seattle Surge isn't a good team, OAKBOYZ will be LAT's veto. Or isn't a good team at hardpoint. My fault. No disrespect to Seattle. Well, maybe I'm not wrong. Because even though their hardpoint isn't that great, their OAKBOYZ is 7-6, and they've gotten some really nice wins against good teams on that map. So that would leave us Berlin and Tuscan. And the issue is they're just not really that good at either map. Like when you look at it from a, you know, an overall scale of all the teams, they're just not a good hardpoint team in general. And then LAT, they're 7-4 on Berlin, 11-4 on Tuscan. It favors them no matter what. It favors them in both. I'm not saying LAT is going to win both, but it definitely sways in their direction. I'm assuming we're going to see a Berlin control here. And once again, I'm going to have to favor LAT. LAT, their only loss so far is against Minnesota, where I really think that they kind of threw. You know, I think that there's a good shot that they could have been 4-0 in this mode. But getting back to the pick'ems, I just think that the way these two teams match up, I have to favor LAT. Obviously, I'm a homer. I'm biased, but I think LAT wins this series 3-1. I think that they're just too much for Seattle Surge and hardpoint. Seattle Surge is going to have to Neslo their way. It's going to be 2 S&Ds and a control, but I just don't know if they have it in them. Then moving on to the Florida Mutineers versus the Minnesota Rocker. I think Minnesota bounced back. I do. Not a fan of Florida Mutineers. They don't move me as a team. They don't. I don't know why. Minnesota, I also don't know if they're actually like hitting stride or if their flawless week 1 was, you know, largely due to the fact that Attach had a 1.4 in both series. I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe Minnesota is turning a new page and they're finally figuring it out. And then that leaves us for our last series of the day. It's going to be Atlanta FaZe versus Boston. I got Atlanta FaZe. I think this actually could be a 3-0. I don't know. Boston is solid. I just don't think they have enough firepower to beat a team like the Atlanta FaZe. And then that moves us on to our last day of the weekend. LAG versus Paris. I think LAG bounced back. I think they win this series 3-1. They get a great start with Big P in the starting lineup again. Moving on to the match everyone wants to see. This is going to be the Atlanta FaZe versus OpTic Texas. Now, OpTic Texas have Proloop. He is subbing in for Illy. And before I give you my answer, I'm also going to break down some of the stats and how I think it's going to play out. So when you look at Atlanta FaZe, I mean, people really think they kind of fell off because of how dominant they've been. Still a great team. Interestingly enough, their S&D, which is normally their bread and butter, is their worst mode in this game so far. But in hardpoint, they're 32-13 on the year. S&D, you know, they're almost 500, 18-19, and they control, they're 18-10. And on the side of OpTic Texas, you obviously have very similar results, but they're definitely more well-rounded, I would say, so far in this game. They're 24-18 in hardpoint, 20-14 S&D, 22-5 in control, best control team in the game, but we've all known that for a while now. But so look, Atlanta FaZe, they have a hardpoint auto veto. That's Berlin hardpoint. Okay, they're 2-2 on it, but they do not like playing it. And OpTic is the exact same. They don't like playing Berlin at all. They never picked it. They vetoed it 7 times, and they're 4-6 on it. So both of these teams are not good on Berlin. I would say that could be a toss-up because I don't know if either team is actually going to veto that map. And the reason why is because when you look at Atlanta FaZe's stats, right? Their team stats, they're 8-1 on OAKBOYZ. No one plays them on OAKBOYZ. They're 12-4 on GVU2. They're 10-6 on Tuscan. This is going to be tough for OpTic, realistically. Because when you look at OpTic, they're 6-4 on OAKBOYZ, 6-4 on GVU2, 8-4 on Tuscan. They're great on those 3 maps as well. But they don't have as many reps with Prolu as they did with Illy. And I don't know. You're not going to play OAKBOYZ versus Atlanta FaZe. You're just not. So do you go Gavutu and Tuscan, where they're solid 6-4 and 8-4, but the Atlanta FaZe is 12-4, 10-6? That's where Atlanta FaZe has the edge. Is they trap OpTic into picking one of the maps that they are absolutely dominant at. I know OpTic has beaten FaZe on Gavutu before, I get that, but just because it happens once, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen every single time, right? So I don't know if either of these teams are going to follow through with their auto veto Berlin, or we're going to see OpTic maybe veto a OAKBOYZ. And then if that's the case, maybe Atlanta FaZe leave Berlin in because they have lost on Gavutu to OpTic, but that was with Illy. That wasn't with Prolute. Regardless, though, I'm favoring Atlanta FaZe in the hard points. I truly am. Now, when it comes to the S&Ds, I think this has to go in favor of OpTic. And then the controls, the Atlanta FaZe, they don't like Gavutu. Okay, they vetoed it 8 times compared to Tuscan's 3. And then on the side of OpTic, they don't like Gavutu as well, which makes sense because they're 6-1 on it, which is pretty dominant. But Tuscan control is their bread and butters. They're going to play that every single chance they get. They're also not bad at Berlin. They're 4-2 on Berlin control. Now, I don't know who's going to get to pick the map. They're both... Oh, actually, no. I guess it's just they both veto one. Right? That would make sense. But Atlanta FaZe is 2-0 on Berlin. They also are 9-2 on Tuscan. But I don't know if they really want to go toe-to-toe with OpTic on Tuscan control. So if Atlanta FaZe were to veto Tuscan, OpTic is kind of in an interesting spot, because do they just do their auto veto, even though they're 6-1 on it? Maybe they don't feel confident, or they just, you know, it's like, oh, we'd rather play Tuscan. We are better at Tuscan than we are Gavutu, even though we're great in both. Or do they try and play on Berlin, which is the newest map for control? I don't know, but I think that this is a major series for the Atlanta FaZe. I'll be honest, I think this is my hot take. If the Atlanta FaZe win this series, I think that they actually turn into a completely different team moving forward. I know OpTic, okay, they're not playing with Illy, they're playing with Prolute. But just for Atlanta FaZe's mental, I think it transforms this team because they have a mental block. They do. And I think that they become a dominant force for the rest of the year. If they lose this series, though, that would mean that they have lost to OpTic with General. They have lost to OpTic with Illy, of course. And now they've lost to OpTic with Prolute. I don't know if FaZe will be able to beat OpTic for the rest of the year. And I also don't know if they'll be able to win, because the odds are, you know, you're probably going to be running into OpTic more times than not. So this is a statement series for Atlanta FaZe, and I actually think that they are going to win this series. I do. But with that said, OpTic fans, don't hate me, because once again, if they lose it, I think that they're going to crumble. And then lastly, we have Toronto Ultra versus NYSL. And I think we're going to see an upset here. I think Toronto is actually going to win this series 3-1. And those are my pickups, guys. I hope you enjoy. Hopefully we can go flawless. I got to switch it up, man. I don't know. I got a good amount of, I feel like, chalked plays. I got some underrated, you know, some upset series here. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But I appreciate you all, as always, man. Thank you for the love so much. It means the world to me. And I hope you guys have a great day.